Welcome back to the channel. I'm Colin and this video will be a comparison video of the three iBasso digital audio players I have here. We have here the DX180, DX260 MK2, and DX340. I have put the specs and prices of the players on the screen now. Pause the video if you want to check it out. I'm going to compare the three players in terms of battery life, sound quality, and driving power. If you're interested in the UI and menu system of these players, you can check out the previous reviews I made. They are mostly the same. To test out the battery life of these three players, I played the exact same downloaded playlist on them using Apple Music in the same order. All the players with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off, powering the Arcanus in single-ended mode. For volume, I set all three of them on low gain, and the volume level set at 30 out of 100. The DX340 was set to low DAC gain. It's about the volume I would normally listen at. I played the playlist for exactly 2 hours and recorded the battery remaining from 100% after exactly 2 hours. I recorded 80% battery remaining on the DX180 and 82% battery remaining on the DX340. But the DX260 MK2 had a healthy 91% left. The result does not quite match the playing time on the iBasso spec sheets, as the DX180 has the longest playtime on paper, followed by the 260 and last the 340. I think battery aging does play a factor in this test, as the 180 is the oldest player among the three. But I still think the DX260 MK2 will have better battery life even if all three players have perfectly new batteries when playing in this setting. To compare the sound quality of the players, I first compared the DX340 to DX260 MK2, and then the DX260 MK2 to the DX180. I'll try to explain the differences in sound quality using the three of the test tracks I used to compare these players. For your reference, I was using the default M15M card when I compared these players. The DX180 and 260 was on the NOS filter, and the DX340 was on the original digital filter. The first track was Space Cowboy from Casey Musgraves. I mainly wanted to compare the vocal and the depth of the players through this track. The album was very well mastered and is a great test for sound quality. The most obvious difference for me was the soundstage depth of the DX340 presented over the DX260 MK2. The stage of the track sounded a lot deeper and slightly wider on the DX340, which really helped with the instrument separation. However, I liked how the DX260 presented vocals on this track when compared. The DX340 sounded deep, but it also sounded slightly hollow in the vocals to my ears. The DX260 was more upfront with the vocals and also sounded more natural despite having less depth. There is also a bit of a difference in the bass region, especially in the mid bass. I think the bass of the DX260 has a better focus and more impact. The bass on the DX340 kind of hits and spreads throughout the stage. For this specific track, I like the presentation of the DX260 MK2 more, as I think it's more natural sounding, and I like how upfront the vocals are on this vocal-oriented track. The second track I tested was My Foolish Heart by Bill Evans Trio, a live recorded jazz track from 1961. I really like using this track for testing as the imaging is really good, and there are a lot of different sounds like the audience coughing or chairs moving from different directions. It really sounds quite holographic. The first thing I picked up when comparing the two players is the liveliness of the snares. The snares of the jazz drum sounded a lot more extensive and airy from the DX340. The decay of the snares was also clearer and longer on the 340, and could be picked up more easily. In comparison, the snares from the DX260 sounded a bit dull and muted. During the comparison, it also sounded to me like the piano sounded denser and more realistic on the 340. The stage was also wider and deeper. For the DX260, I think the bass notes from the cello sounds more energetic and impactful when compared. Overall on this track, I tend to like the presentation of the 340 more. it sounds more organic, wider, and deeper, which really makes the 340 shine on a track like this. The third track I want to talk about is Contact from Daft Punk. There are a lot of minute details in this track, and I really want to see how these two players resolve this track. In this track, you'll notice a crackling sound in the intro of the song, kind of like the crackling sound from a record player. After A/Bing the two players, I find that the 340 was able to pick up that effect much better than the 260, which was a bit surprising to be honest. For the voiceover part of the song in the beginning, the DX260 sounded clearer and more upfront, also a little more detailed when comparing them. Then after the intro, there's a part where the drums kick in. On that part, I felt that the drums sounded more organic on the DX340. It kind of jumped out more from the stage to my ears. In comparison, the DX260 sounded a bit flatter. I like the presentation of the 340 more on this track. I really enjoyed picking up the tiny details with a resolving IEM like the Arcanist. After comparing the two players, I find that DX340 and DX260 Mark II both have some areas they are better in. For the DX260 Mark II, I think it has a more natural vocal presentation and punchier, more direct mid-bass slam, which makes it more suitable for pop, rock, and vocal-oriented tracks for my preferences. For the DX340, it has better soundstage depth and width, a more detailed presentation of the decay in the music, and has better detail retrieval. Overall, a more organic presentation. I prefer the DX340 for jazz, classical, and live recordings. Or if I just really want to listen for the details, I will go for the 340. Comparing the DX260 Mark II to the DX180 was much simpler, because the tonality of the two players were much more similar. Since both players feature similar Circuits Logic DACs, tonality-wise they are very similar, and the sound characteristics are very close in between the two as well. For me, the largest difference or improvement the DX260 Mark II has is in the soundstage depth and width. In comparison, the DX180 sounded a bit flatter, not in terms of frequency response or tonality, but in the soundstage. Listening to the 260, you will be able to hear more space and breathing room between vocals and other instruments in the track. Another improvement you'll notice when you compare the two is that the overall resolution is also better on the 260 Mark II. Details in vocals, guitar plucks, and everything else is just a tiny bit more detailed on the 260 when compared to the 180. In summary, I think the DX260 Mark II is a good overall improvement from the DX180. You'll be hearing more depth and a better sense of spaciousness in tracks that present it if you are upgrading from a 180. In this comparison, I don't have a preference in genres these are suited for, because the tonality is just too similar. I would suggest you purchase these two players according to your budget. I tested all three of the players with different IEMs and headphones. IEMs include the Ziget Arcanist, and the headphones include the Beyerdynamic T1/3 Gen, the Hi-Fi-Man R10D, and the Fostex T60RP. Here is the maximum power output of each player according to the spec sheet. For IEMs, I think all three of these players are able to easily drive basically any IEM on the market with ease. No matter if you're using the balanced port or the single-ended port, driving power wouldn't be a problem with any of these. Then, it's easy to drive low impedance headphones. This includes the Beyerdynamic and Hi-Fi-Man here. I think you'll be probably getting 80% of the potential out of a DX180 on high gain with these. I find it slightly lacking in dynamics in certain tracks for the Hi-Fi-Man, but on most tracks it works quite well with the DX180. On the DX260 and 340, I feel I was able to get these headphones close to its full potential using medium or high gain. So I think most sensitive low impedance headphones will be perfectly fine on these, even on the single-ended output. Last, it's inefficient low impedance headphones like the Fostex T60RP. These are the most difficult to drive among these headphones, as these like to be driven with a lot of current. They are a set of planar magnetic headphones. I wouldn't really use the DX180 with these, as you wouldn't be getting much out of it. You have enough volume, but the dynamics are just lacking, and I'd rather use IEMs instead. For the 260 and 340 in high gain mode, I would be happy to drive the T60RP with them. They sound much more open and dynamic when compared to the 180. I feel like the driving power of the 260 and 340 is on a similar level. But what really separates the 340 from the 260 is the super gain mode, which requires an external DC adapter. This is the part where the 340 is able to get the final feel percentage of performance out of the T60RP. So this is my experience with the three digital audio players. I think deciding which one to get will mostly depend on two factors. First, your usage scenario, and second, your budget. If you will be using the player on the go most of the time, I wouldn't recommend the 340 as it's just massive and super heavy. It's definitely a burden to put in your pocket, so definitely consider that too. If you'll be using it on the go most of the time, it also gets warm in your pocket, while the 180 and 260 stays relatively cool. Then it's your budget. The sound quality of the players basically scale with the retail prices. The more expensive player simply just sounds better. There might be some taste preferences between the 340 and 260, but the 260 is just superior to the 180 in terms of sonic performance. The DX340 will also give you more driving power if you have more difficult to drive headphones, and also gives you the option to change amp cards in the future as well. So this is the end of the comparison video. I hope my insight and experience with these players can help you decide on which player to get. Please let me know if you have any questions about these three players. I'll be happy to answer them. The links to the reviews of these players and purchase links are in the description below. Please like this video if you found it useful, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.